million is about a 40+% increase from FY26. Am I right that not a penny of that is to go to a pay raise for the 800,000 civilians who work for the Department of Defense?
We have 4.2% of a civilian salary set aside for bonuses to make sure we can recognize high performers in the civilian workforce.
But you have guaranteed pay raises for the active duty and the Guard and Reserve component, but no guaranteed raises for
There are guaranteed
civilians.
raises for the military, but in the last year, this department's given out more civilian bonuses.
Well, if we're going to increase the defense budget by that much, I would hope the committee would take a look at this. Chairman Caine, man, I like the sound of that, Chairman Caine. General Caine, I want to ask you a question about Southern Spear. It's an operational question. I know from your background that you carefully act to keep military actions within the rules of war. What legal justification could there possibly be that would allow the U.S. military to strike boats in international waters and kill the occupants of those boats without a showing of evidence that there's narcotics on those boats?
Well, sir, as you know, our job is to show the range of options, the associated risks, and then take those execution orders, transmit them down to the COCOMs on legally appropriate and legally backstopped actions.
Could you give me a legal justification?
Well, sir, the execution order, I don't have
striking boats that do not have evidence that they're carrying narcotics?
I apologize, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I don't have a copy of the order issued to Southcom with me today. It's classified in its own right, which clearly articulates, based on a variety of criteria, what constitutes a valid military and legally valid target in that theater. And I know, I just want to say I know and trust that our commanders at echelon are rigorously following that legal opinion and those legal boundaries upon which we've been issued those orders.
And General Caine, I would encourage, again, my colleagues, I am at a disadvantage. I've seen the legal opinion, but I can't talk about it because it's classified. I've seen the targeting criteria, but I can't talk about them because they're classified. I've seen the secret list of DTOs against whom we have declared war that even they haven't been informed of, but I can't talk about it because it's classified. But I would urge all of my colleagues to go to the SCIF and read the targeting criteria and get briefed about it, and then also look at all of the files of all the strikes that have taken place. I've done that with the first 46 strikes or so. And I think there's a profound mismatch between what is occurring and the underlying assumptions in the legal opinion. And I would just encourage my colleagues to dig into this. To Secretary Hegseth and General Caine, the War Powers Resolution specifies that a war initiated by a president without congressional approval must be concluded within 60 days. It can be extended by an additional 30 days if, quote, the president determines and certifies to Congress in writing that unavoidable military necessity respecting the safety of the U.S. Armed Forces requires the continued use of such armed forces in the course of bringing about a prompt removal of such forces. We're right at the 60-day deadline. Is the president intending to either seek congressional authorization for the war in Iran or send us the legally required certification that he needs an additional 30 days to remove U.S. forces from the war?
Just briefly on the previous question, we do know that these are designated terrorist organizations, so we treat them like the Al-Qaeda of our hemisphere, just a note.
But that was not the question I asked.
I know there's more to that question. I just think it's important for the public to understand that. There's no willy-nilly targeting of drug boats. We know exactly who these people are affiliated with.
I was asking about what's on the boats.
On Iran. Ultimately, I would defer to the White House and White House counsel on that. However, we are in a ceasefire right now, which our understanding means the 60-day clock pauses or stops in a ceasefire. You're not in. Yeah. It's our understanding, just so you know.
Okay, well, I do not believe the statute would support that. I think the 60 days runs maybe tomorrow, and it's going to pose a really important legal question for the administration. We have serious constitutional concerns, and we don't want to layer those with additional statutory concerns. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. Mr. Secretary, I mentioned in the classified hearing today, but I do think the $1.5 trillion top line is historic, it meets the needs. And the other thing is, I mentioned in our earlier meeting, you know, the President's done a really good job of getting other allies, NATO and Asian allies, to step up, meet a 5% GDP of defense spending, and in many ways, that's what this is doing as well. So isn't that important as well in terms of our global leadership? What you and the President are providing is that example as well?
I think the more we step up, the more the world should look at the American leadership and example and step up as well.
And they're going to do that. That helps.
We will. It remains to be seen whether some of our allies actually step up to their commitments, but that is the hope.
Let me go to an element of that budget that I mentioned in the classified hearing. You know, I always like to put this chart up in different hearings. We have the examples. So a lot of our adversaries, the Chinese, the Russians, in my AOR in the Arctic and the North Pacific. These are the numbers just recently: ADIZ incursions, EEZ incursions by the Russians, by the Chinese. By the way, the green ones are joint Russian-Chinese strategic bomber task forces, joint Russian-Chinese naval task forces. This is America, right? This is a really important part of our national defense. So I was pleased to see that one of the elements in the budget was what's referred to by the Air Force as the JBER fighter town recapitalization, given how strategically important that Air Force base is. General, can you talk a little bit about that recapitalization? It's for building out what is a very strategic base, but old. A lot of these facilities are from the 1950s. The goal in the Air Force's language was to have a recapitalization to provide a new state-of-the-art fighter facility capable of supporting multiple platforms now and well into the future. $6.9 billion total authorization, $2.2 billion appropes for this year. Can you talk about the importance? I was glad to host you at JBER recently. Can you talk about the importance of this element of the President's budget?
Yes, Senator. Thank you for that. And you know, our investment up at JBER is essential to modernizing the nation's ability to project power and capabilities, and really bolsters our effort in not only the Indo-Pacific but also in the high north and the Arctic, which I know is something that's passionate to you. The Arctic is certainly becoming more operationally and strategically valuable, and we need to be thinking proactively around how we're going to set the conditions for us to offer a range of options to the Secretary and the President about power projection across a range of capabilities, and fighters is certainly one of them, and the recap effort that's there. You know, it is our ability to protect that flank is a national imperative and something that we want to keep focused on, and we appreciate the efforts across this committee and the rest of the Congress to help us with that.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, one of the things that I've been talking about and I think is really important now is American energy and us being energy dominant. President put a recent executive order out highlighting the need to accelerate the ability to produce LNG in America. We have a huge LNG project that we're getting close to getting off the ground in Alaska. It would be huge for our military in terms of energy for our military, huge for our allies. And can I get your commitment to work with me and this committee? You mentioned in your testimony the Office of Strategic Capital. This, to me, is one of these projects that I think would be absolutely critical for our national security. We talked about this just in Admiral Paparo's testimony last week. He was talking about the Alaska LNG project as hugely strategic, kind of a private sector, American counter to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. I think it'd be a great opportunity to work with the Office of Strategic Capital. Can I get your commitment, Mr. Secretary, to do that on this project?
Yes, very aware of that project, and I think it's the Office of Strategic Capital is a great place to look at partnering.
Great. I appreciate that. Finally, I'm just going to ask 47 years of war that we've had with Iran. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they talk about these civilian casualties. These are all horrible whenever there's any civilian casualties. But just general, do our forces target civilians ever?
Sir, never intentionally, and I don't know in any particular case of unintentional, but we don't do that. That's
do
not
our-
core to our American
thank you.
values or how we approach things.
Do our adversaries target civilians,
Yes, sir.
like the Quds Force?
Yes, sir.
I think it's really important, as we keep bringing this topic up, to remember who we are and who our
Thank you,
adversaries
Senator
are.
Sullivan. Senator Sullivan, do you ask unanimous consent to have the two exhibits added to the record? at
Yes,
this
sir,
point?
Mr. Chairman.
Without
Thank you.
objection, that will be done. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've had a lot of discussion about Iran. I'd like to talk about several other aspects of the budget. The first is the way the budget's been constructed. Ever since I've been here until last year, we've had bipartisan budgets and bipartisan National Defense Authorization Acts, and passed by majorities. I voted for all of them. And all of a sudden, in this year, 25% of the budget is essentially out of the process and will be passed presumably through some kind of reconciliation, which is by definition a partisan exercise. Mr. Secretary, why not all those items, housing or Golden Dome, whatever, why aren't they in the regular budget? Why do we suddenly have a two-part budget where this committee and the Congress generally has oversight and input to a process where a quarter of the budget is essentially a slush fund?
Well, Senator, I appreciate the question. I wouldn't characterize a quarter of it as a slush fund, but I recognize that we see it as in totality, as a $1.5 trillion budget.
But why
Multiple
the
ve-
separation? Why the two pieces?
Multiple
Why not just a
vehicles.
regular
As you
budget?
know, there are multiple dynamics that play into why there are multiple vehicles, but we are fully committed with working to the committee to ensure that the right vehicles are utilized to get precisely this amount, $1.5 trillion.
Why should we, you didn't answer my question. Why are there two pieces? Why not? For time immemorial, we've done budgets here. We've never, to my knowledge, we've never used this reconciliation process for a defense budget before. What's going on? Why not put it in
My
the
understanding
regular
of the
budget?
reason for the vehicles is to ensure we actually get to 1.5 trillion, which is the most important bottom line. The most
what you're
important
worried
bottom line is that top line of 1.5 trillion to fund what we need, and we think this process is the most effective way to get there, Senator.
Well, what you're really saying is we don't want to deal with that pesky Congress and their appropriation process. I think this is significant, Mr. Chairman, that we're basically abdicating a quarter of our responsibility in terms of this budget. Let me move on. One of the factors of this budget that hasn't gotten any publicity is that there's zero funding for Ukraine. That's correct, isn't it, Mr. Hurst?
That's correct. There's no USAI funding in this budget.
And there was 400 million that was appropriated last year by a bipartisan, bicameral act of Congress. What's become of that money? My understanding is not a dollar of it has been dispersed.
It was released very recently, and again, we got these funds, I believe, in March. And it takes time for funds to flow through the department, but it's going to get put to work very shortly. We're going to work with the UCOM commander to make sure we use these funds in the most appropriate way possible.
I didn't want Senator Sullivan to be the only one with an exhibit. This indicates what's happened to our support for Ukraine over a period of years. The orange bars are U.S. support. The blue bars are Europe. As you see, Europe is 99% in the year 2026. Same thing with humanitarian and other aid to Ukraine. And yet this is, I believe, an existential struggle for the future of democracy, where we had an aggressive country invade a neighboring country without any justification whatsoever. And by the way, that invading country is the major winner so far of the war in Iran. They've gotten, the estimates are $40 to $80 billion of additional revenues from oil and the relief of sanctions as a result of the war in Iran. Secretary Hegseth, why are we abandoning Ukraine?
Senator, if you would hold that chart back up.
Yep.
I think that's a beautiful chart. I think that's exactly what we want. We want Europe stepping up and funding and shouldering the burden. They are rich countries worth $20 trillion versus an economy of $2 trillion. Europe can step up, Europe can fund it, and they have through our Pearl Initiative and through our European Command. That's exactly what the American people want to see, is other countries stepping up and funding that. If it's that important to Europe, which I understand why it is, and the incursion of Russia and the bravery of the Ukrainians, then European countries should pay for it, and that's exactly what that chart says, and that's the administration policy.
So we don't have any interest in what happens in Ukraine. Is that what you're saying? It's only the Europeans?
I'm saying the threat is far closer to rich and capable countries in Europe, and they should step up to lead the charge, and that's why that chart is a good thing to see.
They have stepped up, but I think the American people should understand that we've stepped back, in fact, stepped back to the point of abandoning.
This is a war that never would have happened under President Trump, and he supports ending it through a deal, and he's pursued that.
So far, it hasn't happened. I'm out of time. I want to talk about DTOs, who designates, but we'll take that up later.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator King. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's apropos that I'm following my friend from Maine. Missouri and Maine came into the union at the same time, but we couldn't disagree more on this particular point. We may have to separate here. I actually think it's interesting that Ukraine just came up, because we've heard from my colleagues on the other side discussion about the cost of what the ongoing American effort. There was never a discussion about the $200 billion we were sending to a foreign country that's not even in NATO. Never. In fact, when amendments were offered for independent audits of how that money was spent, there was bipartisan opposition to that kind of oversight. So I find it really rich now that there's a complaint that we're not spending money on Ukraine. And by the way, $30 billion for salaries for bureaucrats, pensions and social safety net programs, and government operations to keep the state functioning during wartime. That's where American tax dollars were going, $30 billion for bureaucrats in Ukraine. And we just heard a speech for more money for Ukraine, yet the $1.5 trillion for this country is being balked at. I mean, I've seen Ukraine flags all over this Capitol for 3 years. At the same time, the same people call the President of the United States of this country a Nazi. So forgive me if I feel like we've lost our bearings a little bit. So I'm all for the America First agenda. I'm all for us realigning our priorities. I'm all for the national defense strategies that says our core strategic interests are the homeland, the Western Hemisphere, and the rising threat in China. And that means our European allies should step up. If Vladimir Putin is truly some existential threat and the next Hitler that's going to roll through Europe, you would think, by the way, he can't take Kiev, so you can't have it both ways. He hasn't made it to Kiev. But they would step up. And we better start demanding that, because if we want to meet the challenges of the 21st century and China, our priorities, our focus has to be somewhere else. It doesn't mean abandonment. It just means a true partnership with our European allies, who for a very, very long time have not stepped up. I want to ask you, Mr. Secretary, in your first year, one of the things I think that's really gone towards this morale and recruitment boom that we've seen through your leadership and President Trump was finally taking on the sort of cultural Marxism that had taken hold from the highest levels of leadership, from the President of the United States to your predecessor, this obsession with DEI. Could you just walk through maybe the worst example that you saw and a way that you addressed that and how it was affecting morale?
Well, thank you, Senator. First of all, I want to fully associate myself with the first 2.5 minutes of your comments, and I appreciate that perspective very much so. I would note $30 billion for bureaucrats in Ukraine is more than the bill that we've talked about today for a existential and critically important war to ensure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. That's worth noting. I haven't talked about it as much in these hearings because this is a budget hearing about $1.5 trillion that's historic and significant. But underwriting the change that we've seen at our department was a laser focus on getting back to basics. And the key word to that is merit. We had a department that was obsessed with gender, ideology, and race, diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, the mantra you would hear dripping from the lips of generals and with a serious look on their face was, "Our diversity is our strength," which is the single dumbest phrase in military history. Of course, our diversity is not our strength. Our unity is our strength, our shared purpose, the flag we wear and the Constitution we serve to defend. And when you clear that debris away, whether it's Marxist ideologies or social engineering or political correctness or quotas based on gender and diversity, you get the best of the best rising up, regardless of gender, regardless of race, motivated by that environment where merit reigns. It's accountability, standards, lethality, readiness, training, all the debris wiped away. That is the secret sauce of the revival of the War Department and why Americans are attracted to serving in it and why those inside it, why morale is sky high. And any insinuation that it is not are coming from folks who haven't been in our units recently. Go visit the troops at every level, and their morale is at record levels.
And I want to talk about morale with the 15 seconds that I have left. I want to thank you for coming to St. Louis for your Arsenal of Freedom tour, where the next generation aircraft, the F-47, is being built by the hardworking men and women in Missouri who take a tremendous amount of pride for that aircraft that's going to go further, see further, go faster, have a bigger payload. And I know there's another decision coming with the FA-XX, but really appreciate your leadership, and thanks for coming.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Senator King, do you wish to ask unanimous consent to include your exhibit in the record?
Yes, please.
Without objection, that will be done. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Americans are paying a high price for Donald Trump's war with Iran. We've got 14 service members who are dead, over 400 more who are wounded. Prices are rising for nearly every American family. But someone is profiting off Trump's war. Insiders who know what's going on and who place bets on that inside information. On March 23rd, just 14 minutes before Trump unexpectedly posted about, quote, very good conversations on ending the war, traders suddenly bet $500 million on the price of oil, which, once Trump made his announcement, immediately dropped. It happened again on April 7th, and then again on April 21st, a surge in oil bets, then a Trump post, and then a huge shift in oil prices in just the space of minutes. It looks like insiders have been making out like bandits using secret information about the war. Now, one U.S. soldier has been charged, but that was for betting on capturing Maduro months ago. Not a single person has been charged in the many, many, many trades over the Middle East war. So, Secretary Hegseth, do you have any explanation for these perfectly timed spikes in trading activity other than insider trading?
Senator, all I can tell you is that everything we've done in our department, everything we've done with information, in working with the White House and across the interagency has been completely above board.
Well, so what does it mean? Do you have any other explanation other than insider trading? Do you have a story for why just minutes before there's an announcement, there's a surge in trading activity?
Senator, I'm more than focused on doing my job and ensuring we execute properly, which thankfully, under this administration, our troops have done incredible things in all these missions. My job in all of those moments is to make sure we're prepared. And that's part of the reason why we've been so successful in these raids, in these efforts, is that this joint force is prepared.
You're saying you're not paying any attention to this insider trading. Is that what you're telling me? That you've paid no attention to this? You haven't noticed it? You haven't done anything about it?
What I'm saying is we're focused on our mission of executing for the American people, and what happens in markets is not, in betting markets is not something we're involved in.
What happens in betting markets doesn't matter to you, even if the information may be coming from insiders in your office?
Senator, it's not something we're involved in at all. And of course, we take operational security at every level very seriously. In fact, no one's taken operational security more seriously than us. If you look at what it required to keep secret Midnight Hammer and Operation Maduro, the absolute resolve with Maduro, and the steps we've taken,
So,
no one's been tighter about ensuring that operational security is
to
ensured.
deal with insider trading out of your office?
I mean, we would ensure at every level that inside information
I
is
take that as a no.
properly safeguarded.
All right. Well, obviously you're not. I'm also concerned about recent reporting on your own financial dealings with regard to profiting from the war in Iran. The Financial Times reported that your broker tried to buy hundreds of shares in a BlackRock fund invested in defense companies just before the war began. The law clearly prohibits the Secretary of
That entire story is false, has been from the
Let me
beginning,
finish
and
my
was made up out of whole cloth. And anybody that looks at it sees how it was
law-
worded from the beginning to make it look like I was involved in something I had nothing to do and never have. So any
law-
insinuation that I've ever profited, other than serving this nation, what I give, what you give, what others give, I'm not looking for money. I don't do it for money. I don't do it for profit. I don't do it for stocks. And that's part of the reason why I'm able to be effective in this job, because no one owns me. No one owns this department. No one owns this president, and we can execute for the American people, and we
The
do.
law clearly prohibits the Secretary of Defense from owning stock in the 10 biggest defense contractors. Other senators and I sent you a letter with detailed questions about this, and you have not given us a response. So I'd like to hear you say, did you, through your broker at Morgan Stanley or otherwise, seek to invest in any defense-related funds right before Trump started the Iran war?
I'll give it to you as a big, fat negative.
Then let me ask you a second question. Is your broker getting your personal sign-off on any investment in individual stocks?
Bigger, fatter negative.
He's not getting your sign-off before he makes investments in defense stocks? Can I refer you to your
I'm not making
ethics
investments,
agreement?
Senator.
I am asking, does he know that he has to get your sign-off before he does that?
Of course.
The
I don't know
time
what
of
you're
the
looking for, but you ain't
senator
going to
has
find it.
expired. Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
I would like to enter into the record the ethics agreement that the Secretary of Defense has signed, that he will sign off personally before his broker makes any attempt to buy defense stocks.
Is there objection?
Thank you.
Without objection, it will be admitted. Senator Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, you're doing a great job. I've been in Washington for 10 years, several secretaries of defense, now Secretary of War. You're the best that we've had since I've been in Washington. What you've done to restore readiness, restore military recruitment, get the Pentagon focused on warfighting is second to none. And I appreciate what you and President Trump and General Caine are doing very much. In fact, General Caine, according to the Department's 2025 China Military Power Report, quote, China believes the next revolution in military affairs will occur when militaries transition to intelligentized warfare and fully integrate artificial intelligence, big data, advanced computing, and other technologies into the joint force, end quote. Can you describe, General, in greater detail how the PLA is using AI to enhance its military capabilities?
You bet, Senator. They are attempting to integrate AI across the range of their warfighting functions, which extends to command and control, information advantage, intelligence, certainly kinetic and non-kinetic capabilities, and to a certain extent, sustainment. I'll note that so are we. And in many cases, we are out in front of them. I want to commend our chief digital and artificial intelligence officers inside the joint force at the COCOMs with the services, who are also leaning very far in as we march towards a digitized joint force that allows us to see and command and control the force better.
The China Military Power Report also goes on to note that the Chinese AI sector remains, quote, constrained by its limited access to high-performance AI chips. General Caine, how big of an advantage is it for the American warfighter that America's arsenal of compute is bigger than China's?
Sure, it's critical to us, and while I acknowledge there's all kinds of chip issues in this, it is important to us to continue to scale at that, and I'll highlight a lot of the work going on up at Fort Meade that the committee's helped to advance in the cyber capabilities, so we appreciate the help with that.
If that advantage were eroded and China were able to develop more advanced AI capabilities as a result, What are some of the potential consequences for American warfighters?
Well, sir, it could certainly put us at risk, and that's why we're leaning in so hard. There's always a balance between commerce and protection. I acknowledge those are policy matters, I think, is what you're starting to get towards. But on a pure military-only standpoint, we would see some defense in depth eroded from that.
Secretary Hegseth, do you agree that enhanced Chinese AI capabilities could put American service members at risk?
Senator, we absolutely have to stay ahead. The advantage that AI provides apply to any number of capabilities, whether it's domain awareness, targeting cycles, you name it, AI and leveraging it, and that's why we've made it the forefront. I mean, it's AI first with everything that we do, integrating it at every potential echelon to ensure we can respond faster. If we're better at that than any adversary is, it's going to give us an advantage, and we have to maintain that.
I agree. Do you agree that we should do everything in our power to ensure that American service members go into battle with an overwhelming and fear-inducing technological advantage, particularly with AI?
Always. Overwhelming is the goal in every scenario.
Earlier this year, the Pentagon issued updated guidelines that prohibit department funds from supporting grants and contracts involving fundamental research collaboration with blacklisted Chinese entities. How important are those restrictions to safeguarding our technological leadership?
Have to have them, especially when you look at the power of models and all of those things. If you have connections to entities that could have connections to your adversary, and you can have degradation of your advantage.
Again, this is where I appreciate your leadership, Mr. Secretary, which has been second to none. And I know that you will work with Congress to help codify those restrictions and encourage taxpayer dollars to never advance the capabilities of our enemies and our adversaries. I appreciate both of your leadership. We've come a long way in a couple of years from, I mean, the night and day difference between the last administration and this administration is apparent to every Hoosier that I talk to. So I appreciate your leadership. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Senator Banks. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Gentlemen, welcome to the committee. I appreciate this discussion. I'll just start off. The number one question I get when I'm back home from people is basically very simply, when will this war end? We know the costs are that the American people are paying, both in higher fuel costs, our farmers are paying because of fertilizer cost. We know that the whole world economy is paying a great deal for this war. And basically, as I think that through, and this is what I want to talk to you about, is that we all know that it's a whole lot easier to go to war than it is to get out of war. That's always the tough question. And we've got to figure that out. And there are some folks who've written quite a bit about this. One text on war by Karl von Clausewitz. Mr. Secretary, I'm sure you're familiar with the book. I know all of the men and women in uniform are. It's the most widely read, most influential military strategy book in Western history, which is pretty broad. And it is the core curriculum that is read in all the war colleges. I read it when I was at the Navy War College taking courses. It's part of what the U.S. military thinks about when to go to war and then how to get out of the war. And one of those core principles it starts with is basically war is the continuation of politics by other means. That everybody knows that quote who's worn the uniform, and others too. And basically it means there's two things about that. It's politics to get in the war, and it's politics to get out of the war. And in between, we rely on the men and women in the military to carry out those policies. So I want to be clear, and I think I speak for all of my colleagues, is that we know the military plays an important part. They need to do the job, and nobody questions the amazing work that our men and women in the U.S. military have done and continue to do. They've performed absolutely brilliantly, and we applaud all that they have done. However, what we do question is the politics part. It's a continuation of politics. So it's our political leaders that get us into war, and our political leaders who have to get us out of that war, which falls on you, Mr. Secretary Hegseth, and others in the administration, including the President as Commander-in-Chief. So, Secretary, are you familiar with the concept in that book of center of gravity?
Sure.
So center of gravity is basically, as you know, it's basically the hub of all the power and movement. Everything depends on it. And Clausewitz will say, if you don't take out the center of gravity, it's very difficult to win the war. You can have tactical successes, you can have military successes, but if you're not focused on that, you're not going to be able to win. Basically, he talks about military strikes are tactical, and tactical success doesn't necessarily create the political conditions necessary to get the parties to the table to negotiate and get it done. So we've got to focus on that. So my question for you, Mr. Secretary, what is the center of gravity for Iran?
Well, the center of gravity, as the president has seen it and as I see it, and he's talked about for 30 years, is their pursuit of a nuclear weapon and what they could do with that in pursuit as an extension of the radical ideology they have professed since the beginning of their revolution. So the prophetic ideology they profess alongside the most dangerous weapon in the world would be the center of gravity of the rationality of this undertaking, which
I appreciate it. I'll ask you to elaborate more. I appreciate it. General Caine, you know more about Clausewitz and strategy than I will ever know, including all the folks behind you. What would you consider the center of gravity as defined by Clausewitz in this type of war?
Well, sir, you're not going to love this answer, but I hope you'll respect it. War is politics by any other means.
Right.
And the political side of that necessitates that our political leaders determine what is the center of gravity associated with that. From a military-only perspective, there's a variety of things academically that we could look at for center of gravities, from leadership to will to capabilities to intent. But I'll defer to our political leaders to determine
that's
what
fine.
that is.
That's fair. I don't like it. You're right. But
I know,
and I know you know the answer to that, and you're just not telling me.
Well,
but I get why you're doing that.
my inner
but I
marshal.
would say, you know, other observers say that basically it's not the leader. Usually, if you take out a leader, that doesn't necessarily make the changes. That in Iran's case, it's probably the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. That's the center of gravity. They're the ones that control the country, and they're very diverse to do that. The Americans' center of gravity is probably our economy and our ability to maintain public opinion support. We already know the public isn't there. We know the impact to our economy. And central to that is the leverage. And I'm running out of time here, but the central of leverage is the Strait of Hormuz. That is bottom line. We have to open that up. We have to take that away from Iran. The fact that we haven't done that yet, and we're 60 days in, we're just now bringing minesweepers from the Pacific in there. We have some unmanned opportunities, but we've got to have the capacity to do that. It was clear, even if there was a plan to keep the straits open, it was not going to be implemented because the assets were not positioned in a place to actually open the straits. If they were, we would have seen those happening right now. We're not. So we're missing the point here. The center of gravity is going to be bringing down the government of Iran in a way that they will want to have a peace treaty so we can protect our country from having nuclear weapons pointed our way. But the center of gravity is going to be, in a lot of ways, is going to be focused on what happens on the straits. And Mr. Secretary, we've got to see action a whole lot sooner in the straits. The world community needs it. We're not going to bring this war to an end until we seize control of the straits in a way
which
that
in part is why
up.
we have a blockade that has been impenetrable for the Iranians, because they don't have a conventional navy to contest it, which means we control the straits.
The time of Senator Peters has expired. Let me observe that I very much appreciate the senator from Michigan suggesting ways in which our effort in Iran could be more successful. I do appreciate that. And let me also observe, Senator Caine, that civilian control goes back well beyond Marshall. It goes back to George Washington, who was wise enough to resign his commission to the elected membership of the government at that time. Senator Sheehy, you are recognized.
I think it's important to note that the objective is not to get out of the war. The objective is to win the war, not to get out of it. And I think we've allowed the narrative to shift so off target here. President Trump did not start this war. We did not start this war. These radical, barbarian, savage clerics who have started killing Americans 47 years ago in a unilateral campaign of terror, murder, treason, kidnapping, torture, have been murdering our countrymen all over this world, almost every single year, hijacking airplanes, hijacking cruise liners, taking our embassies, blowing up our embassies, blowing up our barracks, blowing up our ships, capturing our soldiers and murdering them in brutal ways. They started this war. And it would be a lot easier to beat them if we didn't have administrations shoveling hundreds of billions of dollars into their pockets while they're actively fighting our own people, while our own uniformed service members have been fighting this murderous regime, and we have presidents quite literally shipping pallets of cash to pay these terrorists off. It's been a disgrace. It's been an embarrassment to this country for far too long. But back to the point. General Caine, I have a specific question for you. I think in this day and age, we all know that basically every single operation that we partake in, whether it's stealth bombers, whether it's a blockade, our special operations forces are a fundamental shaping and priority component to all those. Would you agree?
Yes, Senator, I would.
And I think for the last about 15 years, the special operations community budget has been largely flat, even adjusted for inflation. And yet, continuously, we call on those warriors to deliver the impossible. And they pretty much do. We were reminded just a few weeks ago, even after the amazing Maduro raid, when we had to rescue one of our F-15 crewmen, yet again, our community came up and did something that probably most people thought wasn't possible. And they did an amazing job. But we cannot continue to call on a tiny fraction of our military to carry such a heavy load and to have such an op-tempo without the appropriate resources. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on how we can not just increase the budget, but make sure we're shaping their budget in a way that ensures that those warriors are getting the direct support for training and sustainment, but also the platforms that they need, from mini submarines to unmanned aircraft to manned aircraft, and the platforms that are very unique for their mission are furnished and deployed rapidly. So I'd like to talk about the percentage increase of SOCOM's budget, how we affect that, and how fast we can do it.
Well, sir, I'll just highlight my gratitude and appreciation for the entirety of the SOCOM Joint Force at Echelon and the work that they do. You know, I'll leave the budget numbers and the increase percentages to my civilian leadership, but echo to your point, the exponential return on whatever investment they give. These are incredible entrepreneurial leaders at every echelon who do great things as the lights dim, as I say that. So hopefully they'll see that as a nod towards them. But I'll defer on the budget allocation numbers to the comptroller, sir.
First of all, I want to second completely your opening remarks, and that's certainly our view as well. On the SOCOM budget, I'm going to say I think we need to increase what's in this budget, and I've heard from multiple people about that. In fact, that if there is a supplemental, I actually just wrote a note to Jay about it. I think SOCOM, given the op tempo, given their direct participation in so many of these historic aspects, SOCOM should be part of that supplemental as well. Makes complete sense. Who's been shouldering a huge part of the burden? Special Operations Command. So whether it's a supplemental or this budget, I fully agree, and I think we need to invest more.
Great, and I'd ask that particular care be given the era of beards and guns and kicking indoors, as much fun as that was for all of us. It's coming to a close, and we're going to be going back to our roots as specialized commandos, whether it's undersea, Arctic, airborne operations, and as we all became kind of one joint soft force during GWOT, quite frankly, that was an easier problem to resource for, to budget for, and acquire for. It's going to be a lot harder now when our operators go back to their service corners and need platform-specific technologies and training. Submersibles, aircraft take years to acquire, years to specify. It's not just buying more ARs and body armor and ammo and sending them downrange. So I think we have to think about the SOCOM budget a little differently than we have for the last 25 years and make sure we're programming in a way that it's sustained and is protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt, for that insightful exchange. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Secretary Hegseth, safe to say that our weapons like SM-3s, Tomahawks, Patriot missiles have capabilities that are unmatched. That's why they cost a lot, take a long time to produce. Your budget requests $31.8 billion to expand production capacity for critical missile stockpiles. Is that correct? 31.8?
I'm looking at $53 billion for munitions acceleration over 14 critical munitions, of which the ones you listed are a part.
Okay,
so
53.
I believe more than that. Yes, sir.
More than 20 billion more. So we've been working together to grow the industrial base because we're all worried about how our stockpiles would hold up in a conflict against China. Since the start of this war, you've made it a point to highlight the number of strikes the U.S. military is carrying out, citing that more than 13,000 targets had been struck as of April 8th. On March 2nd, you said, and this is a quote, "This was a massive, overwhelming attack across all domains of warfare, striking more than 1,000 targets in the first 24 hours. On March 10th, you said, "Yet again, our most intense day of strikes inside of Iran." On April 6th, you said, and this is another quote, "The largest volume of strikes since day one of this operation." Your department has released video after video of things blowing up. None of us doubt the strength of the U.S. military and their ability to do hard things. I understand that better than anybody. The questions we should be asking and answering are, what does this cost us and what does it achieve for the American people? Many of these strikes use our best weapons, and we're using a lot of them and a lot of interceptors. Open source reporting has estimated that the military has used an outrageous number of Patriots. I'm not even going to say the numbers, but a lot of Patriots, a lot of THAAD rounds, JASSM-ER, Tomahawks, very expensive, exquisite. We can't make these munitions overnight, and it's clear from your budget request that you know that. Can you tell us how many years specifically is it going to take to replace these systems?
Senator, thank you for the question. I would defer to the comptroller on the amount because I think it's a lot higher than 53. If you look at long-range fires, JASSMs, LRASMs, Tomahawks, we're looking at $238 billion.
Okay,
we're looking
lot.
at $40 billion for hypersonic. So I actually think it's closer to $330 billion in munitions.
Okay, how many
ultimately,
years to replenish? That's the question.
I think that's exactly the right question, too, Senator, because the time frame we were existing under was unacceptable.
Okay, well,
and
tell
what this
me-
budget does, I mean, months and years, fast.
Years?
I mean, we're building new plants in real time.
So
that
just to
will
replace what we have
2x,
expended,
I said months.
and then you said years.
It depends on the weapon system, but 2 to 3, 4x of what we have today. So
Okay.
yes, we're dealing with a reality under the previous administration of what they sent to Ukraine and what they allocated
Okay,
elsewhere.
I got it. So
And
we
we're
fired
rapidly doing it
years
quickly.
worth of munitions. And it is clear that these are being expended to try to achieve some objectives. That was the plan. But, Mr. Secretary, this war is stuck. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. The Iranian regime is in place. The nuclear material still in their hands. Americans are being crushed by higher costs. And it's not clear to them at all what the goal of this war is. So, I've got about a minute, and I want to go to another topic. I saw your hearing yesterday, and I'm going to give you one more chance to address a question here. It's my understanding that the definition of no quarter is that legitimate offers of surrender will be refused, or that detainees will be executed. Is that your understanding of the definition?
The only entity that would kill detainees or target civilians is the Iranians, and they're the ones being crushed.
So
it's the Iranian military and their military capabilities.
The question
So
is, do
I
you
disagree
understand-
completely with your articulation.
No, do you understand the definition that I just read you? Because that's the definition from your department's Law of War manual. Is that your understanding? And I'm gonna just get to the point here.
We fight to win and we follow the law, Senator.
Okay, so your quote was, "We will keep pushing, keep advancing, no quarter, no mercy for our enemies." And yesterday, you did not clarify whether you stand by this statement. So I'm going to give you another opportunity to clarify if that is what you meant. Do you stand by that statement you made on March 13th?
We have untied the hands of our warfighters. We fight to win, and we follow the law.
Okay, so you're not clarifying. So you stand by that statement. So you're the Secretary of Defense. The things you say matter. And your response here, right now, makes it clear to the American people exactly why you are not right for this
It makes it
job.
clear to our enemies, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Sheehy has left the room, but it's been whispered to me that I just